Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started shortly, but while we're giving a few moments for others to join, I'd like to walk you through some quick housekeeping notes in the meantime. If you cannot hear the audio, ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker to ensure it's working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. All attendees will be on mute by default. Please post your questions in the questions tab. We will try and attend to all questions during the session. Any unanswered questions during the session will be answered via a follow-up email. And we will be sharing polls during the session. Please participate and share your thoughts. And all participants of the webinar will receive a link to the webinar recording shortly after we close today's session. Now, let's get started. Welcome again, and thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation, peer review in the age of AI, from fatigue to integrity. I am Bart Loevens. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Europe at Integra, a global partner to scholarly publishers, delivering scalable services and innovative solutions that safeguard research integrity and enhance the quality and speed of publications. I'm delighted and honored to be your moderator for this webinar. We have a rich discussion ahead with approx 45 minutes of panel conversation, followed by a live Q&A with you, our audience. And let me briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. Joining me today are Lauren Young, Head of Peer Review at Frontiers. She's leading the development of AI-powered tools to enhance fairness and efficiency in peer review. We also have Molly Cranston, Editorial Content Manager at Taylor & Francis, with deep expertise in editorial operations and open research practices. And we have Sven Fund joining us, Managing Director of Reviewer Credits, with leadership experience across Bertelsmann, Springer Nature, De Gruyter, ResearchGate, and Wiley. Welcome, Molly, Lauren, and Sven, and thank you all for being here. Today's webinar is part of Peer Review Week 2025. It's a global celebration of the vital role peer review plays in safeguarding the quality and integrity of research. Every year, Peer Review Week brings together publishers, editors, researchers, and service providers worldwide to reflect on why peer review matters and how it must evolve. I am proud to share that Integra is a supporting organization of Peer Review Week. Several of my colleagues serve on the Global Steering Committee shaping this initiative. The theme for this year, Rethinking Peer Review in the AI Era, could not be more timely. Running from September 15th to 19th, the theme Explore, Engage, Elevate invites us to consider how technology, especially AI, is reshaping workflows and expectations, while never losing sight of the human values that make peer review the cornerstone of scientific credibility. Molly, let's start with you. One of the biggest challenges in scholarly publishing is balancing speed with quality. Authors and funders expect faster decisions, but editors and reviewers worry about cutting corners. Could you share examples where AI has successfully reduced bottlenecks while maintaining trust in editorial outcomes?
Thanks, Sven. Yeah, I think the primary place where I have seen times reduced from an editorial operations perspective with AI leverage has been pre-peer review. So around desk assessment, supporting faster decision making for desk assessors, whether that's kind of admin staff or editors or peer reviewers themselves. And I think there's kind of three main categories where this has been successful. Firstly, integrity checks that require manual work. So we've all kind of used Authenticate, I'm sure, as a plagiarism checker. And now there are many other checkers out there for integrity checks as well. For instance, image manipulation checkers like Proofig or Image Twin, and we've seen success in these areas where they really support our admin staff to make decisions at desk assessment prior to peer review. I also think language and editing support can really help with kind of understanding if an article needs further human copy editing before it gets to our kind of peer reviewers or editors. It helps them save time to also read articles that are legible. They're not just spending time looking at grammar or copy editing, for instance. And then there's almost all these more kind of nuanced tools that are coming to help with journal compliance now. I've not seen a whole suite of these being fully used to their maximum efficiency, but their effectiveness has been showcased. And I think a couple of examples would be looking at data policy compliance, for instance. There's kind of DataSeer, which is out there, or also providing more information about reporting or even to journal-specific requirements like Penelope AI or Paperfly as well. I think all of these tools are really successful, and I think the most successful ones are the ones that cut down on manual tasks. And I think with the kind of age of detecting AI itself and the use of AI-generated content, I am really excited to kind of see how that develops in the next kind of few years as well. I have to say, though, that the reasons why these work is because two things need to be always accounted for in order to maintain trust with our editors, our authors, and our peer reviewers. And the first is being transparent about using tools. So we've always seen success when we've had being transparent about tool usage. So having clear guidelines and protocols for authors, editors, reviewers, and also internal staff who use these tools on a daily basis. And then the second thing, which is most important, and obviously COPE has strong guidelines around this, but making sure that AI always augments human expertise and supports it, never replacing it. So yeah, those are probably the most areas, desk assessment, but with those two caveats to make sure that we're using it kind of with respect to our researchers and their kind of output.
Thank you so much, Molly. These are great examples of how AI can streamline processes without compromising rigor. And I'm certain that we'll actually get back on the two caveats that you mentioned later during our discussion. Now, let's turn to Lauren to discuss the reviewer experience. Lauren, reviewer fatigue often stems from repetitive and administrative aspects of reviewing. How do you think AI-driven peer review platforms can reimagine the reviewer journey, not only by reducing the burden of routine tasks, but also by offering cognitive support tools that make reviewing more efficient, engaging, and ultimately rewarding, while preserving the rigor of evaluation?
Yeah, thanks, Bart. So, what's really shifted my perspective on reviewer engagement is in the past year is seeing AI move from being a back office tool almost to an actual partner for reviewers. So instead of just automating the admin, which is an option that, as we think about leveraging AI in our peer review platforms, but we're now also learning all the ways that AI can support reviewers to dig deeper into the research itself. And that's not just theory. So for 8 weeks at Frontiers, we've been piloting our own LLM-based peer review assistant. So this is a chat tool built off an in-house ChatGPT engine. I will mention that the secure environment is key for compliance here. Survey results are showing that researchers are already starting to upload manuscripts to GPTs to assist with review, but sharing unpublished research content with these tools is in direct breach of the personal privacy and intellectual property rights of authors. So that privacy is really important. The assistant has been live for all reviewers across several of our journals, and we've been really very carefully tracking usage and compliance and quality of output. We can already see the tool being asked to take care of a lot of the basics, and this is exactly the service we wanted to offer with this. So things like summarizing, checking against research-specific guidelines, and offering a clear review framework so that reviewers can very quickly zoom in on the science itself. And the trend in the feedback that we're receiving is actually incredibly positive, even at this early stage. So out of 114 respondents to this survey, a third claimed that they used the tool. And of those, 80% said that it was helpful in assisting with their review. So this number has actually increased each week as people become more familiar with it. 76% rated the tool's input as good or excellent in quality, and 68% found that the answers were very accurate. So this last metric tells us two things. First, that reviewers are confident in rating the accuracy of the responses enough to tell us when it's not working. And second, that we have room for improvement. We knew that going into this, it's why it's a pilot, but for what is a deliberately basic version of what we could offer and will soon begin to offer, this is a really exciting start. So when it comes to reviewer fatigue, it's not just about saving time. AI here is also, as you said, Bart, it's acting as that cognitive support. It's nudging reviewers to be thorough, flagging gaps, and making complex decisions feel more manageable, all without overstepping the compliance boundaries. So we need that expert judgment to be augmented. But I think perhaps most importantly, as we are talking about this, satisfaction with the review process itself. So our indication of how engaging and rewarding the assignment is, that's rising. Our NPS scores, or Net Promoter Scores, amongst users is now solidly positive, and qualitative feedback from this pilot, all from, I found it helpful, to I still want the final say, but I appreciate the structure. All this is showing that AI support can empower and reassure. Of course, more than half of the reviewers, I'm sure you noticed, haven't used the tool yet, often because they didn't spot it, they didn't know what it does, or they simply preferred their own methods. And I think that's a reminder that technology can only create value if its users know it's there, they know its value, and they feel confident using it. And that comes back to feedback received in some of the AI surveys that are already out there, that a lack of specific guidance, bordering on training, I guess, is holding researchers back from using AI. Now, for others, there's still an inherent distrust, understandably. AI acceptance is still so early that there are feelings of almost taboo surrounding it. We've been telling people for so long that involving AI in a process which should be human-driven would constitute misconduct. But our policies, as they shift and we learn more about the capabilities of AI and the boundaries of it that we must put in place, our guidelines must shift with those. Ultimately, I believe the future is that we want people to use AI to enhance peer review, but there are clear boundaries that we need to outline so people feel that they can use it without judgment, but also how to use it and how to use it well. So I guess in summary, AI-driven peer review platforms are already showing they can alleviate fatigue by automating some of the admin tasks. And what we're excited about is the growing number of reviewers using AI as this cognitive partner. What we need to shift them into doing it is to do it in a secure environment that is protecting authors' intellectual rights and privacy. They need to ask the in-depth questions and then validate the responses. And that makes reviewing not just more efficient, but also more intellectually satisfying and rewarding. I believe that AI could fundamentally reshape the peer review culture long term. So with that thought, I'll hand back over to you.
Excellent, Lauren. I fully agree. AI needs to be understood before it can be leveraged. Sven, let us elaborate on recognition and motivation. Many reviewers actually feel their contributions go unnoticed, which can undermine motivation. In your view, what new forms of recognition beyond the simple thank you acknowledgements would genuinely make reviewers feel valued? And how might AI help scale these recognition systems, for example, through personalized feedback, reputation building mechanisms, or integration with academic credit systems?
Yeah, Bart, thanks a lot. So if we take a step back, right, and if you speak to anybody outside of academic publishing, people are usually pretty surprised that researchers spend so much time of their time on peer review for almost nothing in return, right? And I think that is not even visibility in many cases, visibility that they can use in a timely fashion for themselves. So I think in the past, it's pretty clear that in the past, peer review has often been optimized in publishers' interest, and that's legitimate. It is a very efficient and effective tool by now, but that has been very much the driver in the past. So I think, and based on our research, and I think many people's research out there, the vast majority of researchers are absolutely happy with recognition to start with. So nobody is asking for big bucks. But 80 to 85% of researchers in our surveys basically say, I would be happy if I would just be recognized in a structured, cross-publisher, cross-platform way. I think there are some specific situations where reviewers are happy to review more, faster, better, if they get incentives, specific incentives for new journals, for ailing journals that are out there. We all know these situations in publishing. So I think there are different, and then there's a whole debate around what should these incentives be. We are focusing very much on rewarding with credit points through which reviewers can, in their role as authors, basically get to pre-publishing services and post-publishing promotional services for free. That can also be a training, for example, for early career researchers, where I think publishers should do much more. I'm dreaming of a world where publishers only work with trained reviewers, because I think that would address a lot of the issues. Which other industry would leave their quality assurance processes to people who are not experts in that quality assurance process? They are scientific experts, but being a good chef and being a good customer in a restaurant, a good eater, are two different things, right? So I guess that's something that we need to look at. We have been working with book publishers where payment for peer review, financial payment, is a pretty common feature. I think that's really interesting because a lot of publishers in journal publishers basically have issues and think that there are ethical problems around paying for peer review. I don't think that is necessarily true. I think that is a self-serving argument that publishers obviously are making to basically protect their bottom line, and that in itself is legitimate. But so I think that is also an option. And last but not least, what you mentioned, Bart, is the integration with research evaluation systems and grant application processes. I think that is really key. It makes researchers' lives just easier. They can review more, and they don't have to worry so much about what is happening if you want downstream in the process. So all in all, I think publishers joining not just Peer Review Week, but also making sure that they integrate this into their processes are very well advised. It makes a ton of sense in the interest of researchers.
Thank you so much, Sven. I fully agree. Before we dive into how AI can support reviewers' higher order judgment, let's quickly do an interaction with our audience. We do have prepared a quick poll, and we'd love for our audience to take a moment to share their thoughts, if not done already. Please go to the polls box and let us know which AI support do you think would be most helpful to reviewers? Or actually, I see there's a different poll coming up than the one that I have had prepared on my end. So let's go to the other one. What would make reviewing more engaging and rewarding? Is it reduced administrative tasks? Is it personalized recognition and feedback? Is it career-related incentives? Or is it the opportunities for intellectual contribution? Just stop it for a couple seconds. Interesting to see. Thank you all for your contributions. I'll actually try to use the inputs in my closing remarks later. Molly, as you see, reviewers bring unique human intelligence, such as contextual insights, holistic evaluation, and discernment that no machine can replicate. Yet much of the time is actually spent on repetitive or low-value checks. In your view, what kinds of AI-driven tools could free reviewers from cognitive overload while amplifying their ability to focus on what truly matters in advancing science?
Yeah, thanks, Bart. Great question. I think that this should be approached from a three-pronged approach. So kind of targeting the different stages that we see across peer review. So pre-peer review, identification of reviewers, and then assisting during the actual peer review part of the process. So I think pre-peer review, as we've kind of said before, we want reviewers to focus on the content, using their expertise and their knowledge to kind of decide if the article is sound, kind of harking back to what Sven is saying about QA, and also providing content that will advance human knowledge ultimately. So they do need to receive an article that is complete and free from errors, so that they can make those quality assessments without kind of getting bogged down and looking at things that probably don't really matter that much with, kind of grammatical errors. So again, harking back to desk assessment, I think providing AI tools at this point to make sure there's no missing statements, that we're complying with journal policy. For instance, if there should be a data availability policy because you have an open data policy in your journal, that should be made sure that it's there before it gets to peer reviewers. And then formatting correctly and legibility as well. And I think that, again, reviewers need to be confident that the main integrity signals have been assessed, or they should be provided with reports on integrity, such as plagiarism or image manipulation reports. These need to be easy to read and interpret, though. They can't, again, be bogged down in reading through a report that gives them information that they actually need to, have a PhD in plagiarism to detect what is going on in there. And then the second part is identification of reviewers. So reviewers should receive manuscripts that are within their expert knowledge base. So there's no point in sending a manuscript to a reviewer whose subject's not within their expertise. And I think this goes back to what Lauren was saying about making sure review is engaging and exciting. You don't want to receive a manuscript that you don't want to review. It wastes your time. And again, we could also use tools to show networks with authors and reviewers to avoid conflict of interest, again, making sure that it's going to the right people. And then for during peer review, as Sven has said, reviewers spend a lot of their time on peer review, some of them reporting, a minimum of 3 hours to review a paper thoroughly. So once an article is with a peer review, they need to be given tools to assess that article easier. And again, as what Lauren mentioned in the Frontiers tool, kind of summarization of an article, so a reviewer could apply their knowledge more quickly, or they could have, as I've said, kind of a report on the main integrity signals so that they could assist reviewers in making decisions. And also there could be tools to help assess research gaps or provide contextualization. So a reference list of recent publications that a reviewer can look at to then assess alongside their the manuscript they've been given. And then actually writing the review, of course, we should be kind of assisting with that. Kind of, I think someone mentioned like a review framework, but also providing tips on structuring free texts, or also just assisting with that kind of grammatical formatting, language, etc. and all that. So yeah, 3 areas I think that would really help with kind of making this efficient and kind of taking away that burden and allowing their expertise to shine.
Thank you very much, Molly. Excellent. Now let us focus more on AI and research integrity. Lauren, with the rise of AI-generated content, there's growing concern about subtle forms of manipulation that escape traditional checks. From a peer review management perspective, What practical role do you see AI playing in strengthening integrity screening while ensuring editors and reviewers are not overwhelmed in the process? Perhaps you could also share some innovative approaches that you're seeing within Frontiers?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the reality here is that peer review and the whole ecosystem of research publishing is facing a seismic shift as AI-generated content becomes more sophisticated. I think what is occupying a lot of us isn't just obvious misconduct, but it is those subtle forms of manipulation that slip through traditional checks and even through the most diligent human scrutiny. Um, I think I'm confident in saying that we're seasoned in AI-led manuscript-specific checks. You know, Molly touched upon a lot of these things. Our AI operations are relatively, at least at Frontiers, definitely, they're quite mature when it comes to classic issues such as plagiarism detection, author validation, checking for image duplications. We've spent a lot of time feeding Ira, which is our AI review assistant, the right kind of data and getting ahead of those trying to game the system on a per manuscript basis. But where AI becomes truly irreplaceable is in its ability to scan across thousands, even millions of manuscripts, mining for patterns that no human could ever really spot. For example, just this year, we made the very difficult but necessary decision to retract 122 papers. We could only do that because Iris surfaced really subtle red flag patterns by cross-referencing metadata, contributor names, institutions, and even oddities in like citation histories. And these were things that wouldn't trigger a single alarm bell on their own, but when they're stitched together at scale by AI, it created this picture that then let our human specialists step in and audit what the machine had found and validate the need for action. And that's the future. So it's AI to detect the signal, but then humans for the final call. And it's not just about hunting misconduct, though. We're also becoming much wiser in how we train and assess AI itself. We know that just like any system, algorithms can pick up biases in their results, or the results can actually deteriorate over time, especially as the web increasingly fills with AI-generated content. And that's why we're working really hard to keep feeding our systems with the best possible human curated data and to continually audit both the strengths and the weaknesses of what AI is surfacing. And I think if we slow down on this, then that integrity of AI support will fade over time. And that's absolutely not a risk that we should be willing to take. At the same time, we're working on the positive side of the equation. So teaching AI to recognize not only red flags, but trust markers as well. So these are signals that point to high quality, credible research, whether in the metadata, the methodology, or even the collaboration coming from certain research communities or consortia. Ultimately, we want AI not to just focus on what's risky, but on what's genuinely trustworthy. And even as our systems get ever smarter, we absolutely must retain that human in the loop. Back in 2021, before this was even really a talking point industry-wide, Frontiers established a dedicated auditing wing of our research integrity team so that every significant AI-generated integrity flag is then reviewed and audited by experienced humans before any decisions about the quality or fate of a manuscript are made. For us, again, that dual approach, if you like, so AI insight plus human judgment, that's non-negotiable. Finally, I wanted to emphasize the power of community. So not so long ago, those of us working on the research integrity side, we had to keep our cards quite close to our chests. So not wanting to tip off the bad actors about what we were watching out for. But there has recently been a real shift over the past couple of years towards much greater industry collaboration. And we can now see these almost like silent armies of publishing professionals across organizations quietly sharing best practices, insights, and yes, even specific indicators of misconduct so that we can collectively stay ahead of those who would use AI to subvert our checks. And it's that collaborative spirit that's one of our greatest assets. And it's the only thing that can keep pace with the ever evolving kind of tactics that we're up against at the moment. So, yes, I guess to summarize, AI is transforming integrity screening, not by replacing human expertise, but by supercharging it. When it's used responsibly, so with rigorous oversight, continual training, and close collaboration, AI can become an indispensable tool, partner almost. It helps us stay that one step ahead. It keeps the burden manageable for reviewers and editors. And I guess most of all, it helps us keep trust at the center of scholarly publishing. I'm happy to go deeper into any of that, but otherwise I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. Great insights on how a large player as Frontiers is dealing with these industry shifts. And I would love to have more details, but we probably have to move that to another session. So next, let us discuss making peer review more rewarding and not draining. Sven, question for you. Reviewer fatigue isn't just about workload. It's also about a lack of intellectual fulfillment. How do you see AI reducing repetitive aspects of reviewing while creating opportunities for reviewers to engage more deeply with the science? And could AI help transform reviewing from a transactional task into a more rewarding academic contribution?
Well, I would say at this point, what Molly and Lauren are presenting is probably something that a few publishers do, but I think it is not the reality for researchers as reviewers across the board, right? And I think that is still a challenge here. So I would say that the idea of automation and industrialization, if you want, of processes, is to hand over that work that is dangerous, tedious, loud, dirty, whatever it might be, from humans to machines. Now, we don't have so much loud and dirty, but we have a lot of tedious in peer review, I would say. And I think what publishing as an industry, if you want, as an ecosystem, still fails to do is standardization of workflows. Even within large publishers, you have to relearn peer review and submission processes for every freaking journal that you review for or that you publish with. And that is something which is simply like way before AI, I guess, and before intellectual challenges and fulfillment, where I think we should start, and we need to start urgently. And I think that's also what limits the effectiveness and effectivity of systems like ScholarOne and Editorial Manager and so on. It's not a technology challenge, it's a user challenge, I would say. And I think that's something that we have to address. That was a very long starting point here, but I guess everything that is technically to be reviewed and the panelists have already mentioned that should be done by technology for sure and should be done under oversight. And I think, Molly, you mentioned that in in a half sentence. Top of funnel, the problem starts, right? 75% of reviewers reject on average in the industry a review request because they say this is not for me. I have no clue about what I'm being asked here for. Imagine what kind of huge open door that is for errors, fraud, mistakes, all these kinds of things. So I think where AI can help and where publishers with technology in general can help is, first of all, systematic training in reviews. As I said earlier, I think doing quality assurance without trained people simply does not make sense. Whatever technology you use, how much you use, I think that is something where publishers could really get 5 stars, not only from me, but from a lot of readers of the content, if that would be possible. So, secondly, Some publishers have experimented with buddy systems. I think that is really helpful. IOP, for example, I remember tried this last year and presented it at Peer Review Week. So I think it's great if more experienced researchers support younger researchers in the process of reviewing and learning it on the job and not just theoretically through trainings. And frankly, the third element to me is open and transparent peer review. Imagine every review report would become part of a science cloud around an article. There's so much wisdom, not in every review report, but in a lot of them, that is probably not taken into account by the author for different reasons, because they want to focus the article in a certain way. But there are so many links being established. All these kinds of things that AI does now as technology has been done by humans in the past already, basically referencing out of an article into another context, making sure that a colleague saw this, that, and the other argument. I think that is something where we could all together, and especially in this case, researchers, really push by just deciding for transparent peer review and not being afraid of career disadvantages or whatever the arguments are, and hiding it basically in the unseen. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm afraid that is not so much technology-based, but I think revisiting the peer review process as we do it right now as an industry, anyhow, this would be good timing to also look into those factors and fix them while we work on it anyhow.
Yes, excellent response, Sven. That really sets the stage for our discussion on integrity and workflows. So before we continue, let's turn to our audience again with another poll. Let me check. I probably need to improvise because I don't know the actual polls that were coming up. I was expecting it will be on human oversight in AI. We would love to hear our audience, their thoughts on that one. So let me open the poll box and see what a second one that pop up. So what will make reviewing more engaging and rewarding, according to our audience? Will it be reduced administrative tasks? Will it be personalized recognition and feedback, career-related incentives, or opportunities for intellectual contribution? I see we collected a lot of answers on these already. And the third one did also pop up now, the one that I actually wanted to check. In an AI-assisted workflow, where is human judgment most critical? The one that I've asked before. What will make reviewing more engaging and rewarding? And the third one, what excites you most about AI in peer review? While we are continuing our conversation, if the audience could let their responses on these polls, again, I'll be circling back in my closing remarks on the collected data from these polls. Thank you so much. So again, Molly, traditionally, integrity checks have been seen as friction points in the publishing process. From your perspective, how can AI-powered integrity screening be embedded in such a way that it accelerates editorial workflows rather than delaying them?
Yeah, I think one cause of friction, and I think Lauren kind of mentioned this, but is due to the growing volume of submissions that we're seeing across the publishing landscape. So we, of course, need to maintain integrity and quality that our kind of researchers and the public depend on, while also being able to handle the volume, so making that burden manageable. And I think that for screening, for integrity screening, early stage implementation is key. So not causing blockages at decision-making steps further along in the editorial process. We know that peer review is the most time-consuming part of a workflow, as we've spoken about before. And again, as I've said, kind of providing peer reviewers with legible, complete, publisher-compliant, journal-compliant manuscripts is one way to ensure peer review, more efficient peer review. But I think that there are two stages where we can really leverage that, and that would be at pre-submission and also editorial desk assessment. So for pre-submission, I'm talking about author-facing tools. So providing real-time guidance to authors before they even hit that submit button into the journal. Identifying missing statements or non-compliance with specific journal policy. So if you have an open data policy or you have reporting guidelines that you require, making sure that those are picked up before they even submit, so that they are submitting with that information. I've even seen kind of some tools that help to assess scope. So similarly to making sure that reviewers get the right manuscripts for their expertise, but making sure that articles are being submitted or manuscripts are being submitted to the right journal and it's the right fit before hitting that submit button. So we're saving off the time there by not submitting incomplete manuscripts, but also manuscripts that might just be rejected outright for not being in scope or not being compliant as well. And then authors have to go elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second one is the desk assessment again, so editorial team facing. And I really think that leveraging multi-tool integrations with that human intervention provides a comprehensive and fast screening process. I think we need tools from integrity to compliance to formatting, so those tedious checks as well, which are all kind of built by the experts in the field. And obviously multi-tools are most useful when they're integrated into one interface. So you can save time between not hopping between peer review systems and external tools as well. So yeah, so I think kind of pre-submission and then at desk assessment is the most kind of effective places where you can have those integrity screening tools.
Thank you, Molly. I can't agree anymore coming from a publishing technology company trying to solve these problems. Continuing on human oversight in an AI-driven workflow, Lauren, while AI can bring speed and efficiency to peer review, human oversight remains critical. In your view, where in the workflow is human intervention most essential, and how can we ensure the right balance between automation and expert judgment? And also, what risks do you foresee if tasks are over-delegated to AI or left unsupervised? And why is human context, discernment, and careful review of AI outputs indispensable for maintaining trust and integrity in peer review?
Yeah, thanks, Bart. I touched a little bit about this in the integrity question. I guess in many ways it gets right to the heart of what keeps peer review credible and trustworthy. I think it's clear to all of us that while AI brings a huge boost in terms of speed and efficiency, there are certain inflection points in the review process where the human judgment is essential and probably always will be. For me, the most critical places for human intervention are where nuance, context, and real kind of lived experience really matter. I guess to give a practical sense of that, when manuscripts first come in, AI is brilliant for handling the sheer scale and repetitive checks, like we've talked about before now. So, making sure the files are complete, spotting obvious plagiarism, flagging out of scope submissions, that kind of thing. But when it comes to those borderline decisions where an article might just be at the edges of a journal's scope, or where its value could be recognized only by someone familiar with emerging topics or subtle cross-disciplinary links, there's just no substitute for the discernment of an experienced human editor there. And these sorts of judgment calls can't be automated because they require someone who understands not only the letter of the editorial policy, but also the scientific spirit behind it, if that makes sense. And as we move through the workflow, this human touch only gets more important. So AI might flag suspicious citation patterns or oddities that look like potential red flags, but all of those alerts are just that, really. They're alerts. They're not the answers. And a statistically odd reference list, for example, could mean misconduct, but it also could just be a genuinely innovative approach or reflect the the kind of quirks of a fast developing field. So it takes a human reviewer or an integrity specialist to dig deeper, to consider the scientific context, and to weigh up intention versus like honest error, and decide if something is a real problem or if it's simply unusual. I think where the stakes are highest, such as final decisions or communications with authors, where it's the human element that maintains empathy, transparency, and credibility. So editors don't just deliver decisions, or they shouldn't just deliver decisions. They explain, they mentor them, and they encourage almost. And that's transformative, especially for early career researchers or those from underrepresented communities who might need clear and constructive feedback to grow and keep contributing to science. And as for the right balance between automation and expert judgment, I believe in continually calibrating where we draw that line. At Frontiers, for example, we routinely review the outputs of our automated tools. We see where they get it right and where intervention is still necessary. The idea, long term, I guess, is to deploy AI to handle the heavy lifting, the routine high volume checks, and preserve valuable human time for the more complex, ambiguous, or sensitive cases that benefit from a real conversation. And as our tools get smarter, we let them take on a bit more, but we never stop auditing and adjusting. And if the day comes where the only thing that humans do is approve what the AI suggests, then that's a signal that we've gone too far. Human oversight, I think, should always be in place, sometimes for the tough decisions, often for the unexpected ones, and always for the sake of fairness. I think if we go the opposite direction and over delegate to AI, the risks there are significant. I think machine learning models are only as good as the data that they're trained on. And if past review systems had built-in biases or blind spots, then AI can end up amplifying those rather than correcting them. So without that human oversight, important outliers, truly novel ideas or unconventional research could get flagged as suspicious or irrelevant simply for breaking the mold. And perhaps most critically, if that trust breaks down because people believe that anonymous algorithms and not people are behind the decision making, then we lose the social contract almost that underpins the entire peer review process. It becomes this black box rather than a collaboration between researchers dedicated to advancing science. So yeah, ultimately, human context, discernment, careful review, they're not just a safety net, they're the cornerstone that keeps the whole system credible and inclusive. And I guess to use an analogy, I guess, AI can help us find the needles in the haystack, but only humans can decide what the needle actually is, what it actually means, and whether it, in publishing, moves science forwards. So it's not about choosing between AI and people, it's about creating a partnership where technology amplifies human expertise. We keep coming back to this, each one of us, but crucially, it never replaces it. And I'm fascinated to see how our role in that shifts, transforming from gatekeepers to AI supervisors and auditing specialists. So what we do know is that ongoing dialogue between automation and judgment is the only way to maintain both efficiency and the unwavering trust of the research community. So.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That balance and calibration between human discernment and machine support is so important. Finally, let's talk about the evolving role of reviewers in an AI-augmented ecosystem. Sven, as integrity, transparency, and accountability become central to scholarly publishing, the reviewer's role is evolving as well. what kinds of AI support would empower reviewers to contribute meaningfully, enhancing their impact without adding to their responsibilities? And looking ahead, how might publishers strike the right balance between automation, recognition, and the human motivation that sustains peer review?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it more nicely than Lauren did. I think it is a matter of the balance, right? First of all. Secondly, I think either or is not an option and has never been in peer review. I mean, behind the scenes, technology has been used much more before the launch of ChatGPT and all the other large language models, which brought AI to our attention, than many people are aware. I would say at least since 2015 or 17, a number of vendors and publishers have been working on these systems. So it's in that respect not new at all. And on the other hand, I would say that, I mean, a radiologist, if I get the image right, a radiologist would never question using an X-ray machine to detect a broken bone, right? So obviously we need technology in a world that is technologized, in contrast to breaking bones, to basically detect fraud, errors, which are also there, right? It is not just about fraud, it's also about completely, if you want, legitimate errors that human beings make. And as human beings made errors in the peer review process, machines do so as well. I was part of a presentation a few weeks ago where a researcher did an analysis, a computer scientist, of the top 5 journals in the world, looking at the mistakes in citations that have been made. Top 5 journals, I won't name them, but everybody can figure out who they are. Over the last 3 years, on average, per article, 3.5 mistakes in the citations. So this is a common issue, and it is not that this has come up with AI or something like that. I think this has always been a very fragile and, in the best sense, subjective element of the research process. This is not an objective element, peer review, right? We can detect errors and mistakes, but also judgment, which both Molly and Lauren said, judgment is also a very significant component of peer review. And you know, probably from other fields, there's the famous story around Harry Potter books, which have been rejected 21 times by publishing executives before it got a big hit at Bloomsbury. That also happens on a per article level every day that the sun comes up. So I think we can basically reduce, I would hope that we can reduce peer review time to the reviewer by 50%, down from 6 hours or something like that to 3 hours on average, by using technology in a number of fields. However, it's very clear that the reviewer is responsible also for what a system has detected or not. So I guess we are talking about pre-review. Let's forget about that for a moment, where a researcher hasn't probably seen the manuscript yet. But in the reviewer's process itself, I would say that the reviewer has to take responsibility also for the results of what the system does. But that means they need to understand to work with AI models, which is something that very few reviewers know so far, and very many feel insecure about. And I would hope that the next peer review week is dedicated exactly to that, how publishers together can reach out and provide basic training to reviewers about AI in a way that they can start working with these tools with an understanding, which does not mean that you have to be a computer scientist at MIT, but that you are just aware enough of what's going on, right? Nobody of us understands the search algorithm of Google. So, and it's not necessary, because for different reasons, we trust the system. And I think that level of trust we also need to instill into peer review. It is new, it is something completely unknown to many people so far, but I think this adjustment process of human beings to new technology is something that will help us a lot. I'm pretty confident there, so that peer review will play a much bigger, AI will play a much bigger role in peer review anyhow, a positive role.
Thank you very much, Sven. These are great examples that you shared, and thank you to all our panelists for such thoughtful insights. I think we've covered a wide spectrum, from efficiency and recognition to integrity and oversight, Now, let's turn to our audience and hear what's on their minds. So, to all, if you haven't already, please use the Q&A box to submit any of your questions. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll do our best to cover a couple during the session in the next couple minutes. But if not, we'll come back to you by email with our responses. Again, we really had a fascinating discussion so far, and I'm sure that the questions that dropped during the session are just as good. Let's have a look, and let me start with the first one. Reviewer fatigue has been a concern for many years already. Do you think AI can realistically reduce this burden, or are we just shifting the fatigue to other parts of the system? Lauren, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, I do believe so. I think, I gave quite a heavy response to this in my first answer, but I think, where we need to be careful is in the data that we are drawing together on this, and make sure that we test and speak to our contributors as well. I think we've mentioned a lot about reducing the administrative burden on reviewers, and there is a lot that we can do there in summarizing and also training. Almost, if we're providing enough of a structure in the AI tools that we're giving, we can give them that structure to teach them how to peer review, the kinds of questions that should be asking, with the nuance specific to even a section, let alone a journal or a subject area. You can load AI systems with context of, what quality markers are for that subject area, for that journal, for the submission criteria, all of that kind of thing, so that it alleviates the burden on reviewers to have to hold all of that in context when they are reviewing the papers. So in terms of, if we are making it a more rewarding process, an easier process, then reviewers, in my opinion, reviewers are more likely to sign up for a smaller job, an easier job, and a job where, they are interacting conversationally with something that augments their own expertise, but also can prompt ways out, thinking outside of the box. We were talking recently to someone at Sheffield University who, not on a reviewer basis, but from the perspective of research, asking AI, how could I improve my research? And it suggested a model, statistical model, that ordinarily speaking, in their area, in their subject, wasn't something that researchers usually did. But he was able to stand back and say, you know what, maybe in this instance that is relevant. And so being able to kind of have that conversation and have something that thinks outside of the box, and then make sure we have the guidance in place to ensure that there are safeguards and that we are doing our due diligence as platform owners to ensure that all of the contributors interacting with AI are validating the responses, and that we're giving them all of the tools necessary to validate those, then I do believe that it can be a rewarding experience for reviewers. And therefore, yeah, they will be more likely to accept the invitation. What Molly was saying before about matching, I think, was it Molly? Sorry, it might have been you, Sven, about kind of reaching out to people and it's completely not their area of expertise. That's where, with AI, we will in future be able to improve that matching, to make sure that we are not only matching very accurately on the expertise and who is required to peer review a paper, but also, their profile as an academic, their trust markers, who they work with, and what research they've done in the past, to make sure that there are trustworthy elements to the people that we're reaching out to as well. And as long as we are responsible with the training data that we have around those AI assistants and AI matching tools that we have, then there are no limits as to the pools of candidates that we could be going to. And I'd say responsible because of inherent biases with that data, based on where the research is historically and all of these kind of things. So as long as we are responsible, we can open the doors for reaching the right people globally.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I do see we're running out of time. I see a couple great questions in the chat. For example, how can AI support editors in managing reviewer workload and avoiding reviewer fatigue? How can publishers support honest authors that are trying to publish? And we just have to skip them and respond to this question via email. So thank you again for your thoughtful questions. We wish we could get them all. So this is clearly a topic sparking a lot of interest and passion. And I think as we wrap up, let me highlight 3 key takeaways from today's discussion and the poll data that we collected. I see that AI can reduce reviewer fatigue, but it should enhance, not replace human judgment. That's one. Secondly, recognition and reward systems are vital to sustaining reviewer motivation. And a third one that I collect from this great session is that integrity remains the cornerstone, and AI must accelerate trust in research and not compromise it. On behalf of Peer Review Week and Integra, I want to sincerely thank our panelists, Molly, Lauren, Sven, for sharing your insights and expertise. I also want to thank you, our audience, for your engagement and thoughtful questions. Peer Review Week is about more than efficiency. It's about credibility, trust, and the human values that underpin science. As AI evolves, so must we. This conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to keep engaging, exploring, and elevating peer review during the rest of Peer Review Week 2025. For everyone who registered, the webinar recording will be shared automatically, so you can revisit the discussion or share it with your colleagues. Thank you again, panelists and audience alike, and goodbye for now.